Howdy folks, and welcome to the Hillbilly Kitchen. Today we're making homemade buttermilk pancakes. Well, we're snowed in here, and when you're snowed in, there's basically two things you can do. You can eat or you can clean. So let's cook something to eat. Now, homemade pancakes are pretty simple, and you actually only need a couple of ingredients more than what you would need if you bought a mix. And the mixes are loaded with artificial flavors and preservatives and a lot of other stuff that you just don't want to eat. Now, unless you get a complete mix, which is very, very expensive, you're going to have milk, and I'm using buttermilk. And I'm making a pretty small recipe. You can double this or triple this or however much you want to make enough for the people you're making. But I have a cup of buttermilk, and you're going to need oil if you buy a mix. And I have 2 tablespoons of grapeseed oil here. And you're going to need eggs. I have 1 whole egg. And you're going to need the mix, but of course I don't have mix, so I'm using all-purpose flour. And I've got about 2 teaspoons of baking powder that I'm going to put in it, and I'm going to put a half teaspoon of salt in it. Now, pancakes should also have a little bit of sugar in them. They are pancakes, and they should be sweetened just a little bit. Now, you don't want to get carried away because you usually top them with something that's sweet also. And I also like to put a little bit of vanilla in my pancakes. It gives them a much better flavor, and it does make them taste more like a cake, which is what you want. Now, like I said, it's really simple. It's not really any harder than mixing up the mixes that cost way more money than making it from scratch, and they're also not nearly as healthy for you. So we're just going to dump our flour in our bowl, and we're going to add the salt and the baking powder and our sugar. And we're going to whisk that up just a little bit. Now, when you make homemade pancakes, you might have to adjust them if they're too thick or too thin, but it's not a big deal. If they're too thick, you add a little more milk or buttermilk, whichever one you're using, and you can make them with regular milk. If you're snowed in today like I am and you don't have any buttermilk, just use regular milk. I bought buttermilk for a buttermilk pie, and we have eaten way too many buttermilk pies, so I've got to use that buttermilk. Now, like I said, you want to use a whole egg, and I'm just going to whip that up a little bit before I dump it in here. And I'm not going to bother combining my wet ingredients in something else and then pouring them in my flour. It'll mix in just fine, but I am going to put them all in at once and then mix it up together. So pour in your egg and your buttermilk and your oil. And like I said, in this mini, I'm just going to use about half a teaspoon of vanilla. You can put a little more. And whisk this up. Mine usually does not have lumps in it when I mix it up, but if it has a few lumps in it, it doesn't matter because you're going to let it sit for just a minute before we actually start cooking it while our pan is preheating. While it sits there and rests and your pan is preheating, those lumps will just kind of take care of themselves. So, like I said, you don't need to go crazy mixing this. You don't need to get out a mixer or anything like that. Now, I think this batter is going to be okay, but we'll let it sit for a minute, like I said, while the pan is preheating. And if it looks too thick, we'll just add a little more milk. It's not a big deal. And you do want this, you want it thick, but you still want it pourable. I mean, you don't want to have to scoop it into your pan. And I'll show you what I mean when we get over here and we start cooking. Let's get this stuff out of our way and bring it over to the stove. And I'm going to preheat my pan on about medium, and I want to let my pan get really hot before I put my pancakes in it. Okay, you can see that I have just a tiny little bit of butter in my pan. Now you do want just a little bit of some kind of grease in your pan, but not very much, and we're only going to put that in there when we start. And it's going to make the first pancake ugly, but it seems like they all come out better if you start with just a little bit of some kind of grease in the pan. You have oil in the pancakes, so you don't really have to add any more after that first time. Now I'm using a no-stick pan, but you can use whatever kind of pan you want. And when the kids were little, I did have a griddle, but kitchen griddles can be really, really expensive. So if you've got a lot of kids and you need a griddle, go look in the camping section at Walmart, because you can get those much cheaper. And they have a flat bottom, and they'll sit on your stove eye. They'll go across two stove eyes, and they work great. And that's exactly what I want right there. You can see how it's really pouring nice. Right, now you need something to dip your pancakes out with, and I don't want to make mine huge. You can literally make them as big as this pan if you want to, but a small ladle works nice, and if you want a bigger one, a big ladle works nice. If you're making them for kids too, on a griddle or even in a pan like this, you can make them real tiny. Kids love tiny pancakes. Alright, now we're going to let our pancake cook until we start to see bubbles all over the top, and then the bubbles start to bust, and that's when you'll know when it's ready to turn. Okay, you can see here how we're starting to get bubbles, and they come up to the surface and they pop. There's some that are kind of leaving indentations. You want to get them after they start leaving the little pop marks in your pancake. Once you start getting the pop marks where the bubbles have popped, then that tells you that your pancake is done enough to flip over. Okay, we've made 3 now, and that butter that we initially put in the pan is gone. And our pan is just the right temperature. At this point, your pancake should consistently start coming out really pretty. You should get your pop marks when your bubbles come up. The first one, unless you had the temperature of your pan exactly perfect before you put it in there, I said it's not going to be really, really pretty. And also because we put that butter in there, it's not that pretty. I always eat that one. You know, that's kind of what moms do. But once you make 1 or 2, then they're going to start, like I said, consistently coming out. You'll get the pop marks. They will cook much faster after the first 1 or 2 because your pan is hot now. But you don't need to add any more grease, any more oil, any more butter, anything like that, because you do have it in the pancakes. You can top pancakes with all kinds of things. Of course, maple syrup is the big favorite. And all sorts of fruit toppings. You can also add stuff into them, berries, especially blueberries, chocolate chips. A lot of people like to put little chocolate chips in them. But you can do anything like that that you like. And a really good topping for pancakes is if you make homemade jams or jellies, occasionally you will have a batch that for some reason does not set. And I remember one year my mom had made blackberry jam. Her and of course all of her sisters and my granny all made it, and my mom's was the only one that didn't set, and she was really upset because everybody else's had come out so good and hers did not. But somebody had the bright idea to pour it on some pancakes, and that was absolutely delicious. It was just really runny blackberry jam, and it made a delicious syrup on the pancakes. And everybody was fighting over her runny jam after we tried it on the pancakes. But if your jams or jellies don't set, don't throw them away. Hang on to that and use it for a pancake topping instead of regular maple syrup. It's good for you and it's delicious. So no matter what you like to top your pancakes with, whether it's plain old maple syrup or last year's jam that didn't quite set good, don't be afraid to make some homemade pancakes. Leave that mix in the store with all the artificial preservatives and flavors in it, and keep about half your money in your pocket. It really is easy. It's, like I said, not that much harder than the mix because you still have to add almost all the ingredients into it. Thanks for joining us again in the Hillbilly Kitchen. Don't forget to click like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.